Hey, this is Roger Simon.
And Lionel Chetwin.
Welcome back to Poliwood, where Lionel and I are going to look at some politically incorrect movies and maybe some politically incorrect plays.
Other things.
All right.
Incorrect movies, politically incorrect. Finally, a movie comes along that tells the truth about FDR. I wish it were a better movie, although it's worth watching Bill Murray. It's always worth watching Bill Murray, I guess. Hyde Park on the Hudson. I just want to talk about what I think is politically incorrect. Maybe you want to address the excellence or lack of same in the filmmaking. It depicts FDR as a misogynistic, weak, miserable, philandering scoundrel. The only moment of policy is when he gives a speech, a radio speech.
They weren't doing Bill Clinton?
No, it was close to Bill Clinton.
It was FDR as Bill Clinton.
It was Bill Clinton and Obama clone, because he does his radio speech in which he says, well, if business won't help the people, government has to step in and we can't wait for Congress. I mean, honestly, the little radio speech he gives is the only mention of policy. Is in fact an Obama-like thing. He's shown as a petty little man who puts the King of England in a room deliberately with prints that depict English sailors as monkeys and so on. So I loved that. I mean, finally a film that depicts FDR for what he was, a superficial man who rode the wave of his time.
You know, that's kind of interesting, because when I was a kid, my mother idolized FDR, as most Jewish mothers of that period, right? Little did she know that he had, neglected to bomb the trains to Auschwitz and all the other things we found out subsequently made us think a little differently. But back in those halcyon 50s days, my first stage performance at my grammar school was playing FDR with grayed hair and talcum powder. And my mother was thrilled.
They used to say of that generation of Jews, they had three worlds. Dosseveld, Dalteveld, and Roosevelt.
Right.
This world, the next world, and Roosevelt.
Yeah, I didn't do a good as job as Bill Murray, though. Bill Murray, the good thing about the movie, aesthetically, is that Bill Murray does a great job. The terrible thing about the movie, I think, is that the character of Daisy, who is his, what is it, sixth cousin? Something
sixth
like
cousin,
that.
Yeah.
How that's computed is beyond me. But anyway,
well, Roosevelt's.
sixth cousin, played by Laura Linney, who's usually a terrific actress, is like this really dopey, nothing character that he's having an affair with, and you can't figure out any of this, and you go to sleep.
You go to sleep, except it's beautiful to look at upstate New York.
Oh,
the other politically incorrect thing, which really is, since we do the popular culture here, is a play. It presents itself as a play, and it's available at this moment on Amazon. It's called The Party Line. It's fascinating to me. First of all, it has got the courage to address the question of Duranty, Lenin's original useful idiot, who was instrumental in selling the American people on the kindness and beneficence of Uncle Joe and the Soviet regime. It's extraordinary, particularly for a play. It does not try to constrain itself with two or three characters, but it roams like a drone flying over the history of the time and later generations. It is fluid. It is somewhere between a film and a play, and it's extraordinary reading. It would be wonderful to watch as a film, and it would be astounding on a stage. It's a remarkable piece of work, really. Not surprising. Well, I can't say it's not surprising.
My wallet is off camera here.
The authors here are none other than Walter Simon and Sheryl Longin, his bride of many years. It really is an extraordinary work. Deals with an important subject, totally politically incorrect, and I really want people, everyone, I wish everyone could read this, because we're all looking for ways to break through. I want, if you would, address how you structured this thing.
Well,
how you told this story and what this story
look,
is.
The finest playwright in the English-speaking world right now is Tom Stoppard, to us.
Okay.
And we had been reading a lot of Stoppard. I know you probably don't admire Stoppard as much as we do.
I admire him.
He's a bit politically incorrect himself,
yes,
as you know.
Yeah, rock and roll.
He's a libertarian, self-described, and he liberated the theater a bit. In the what you're talking about really is going back to Shakespeare a bit, because Shakespeare was one hell of a film writer. In fact, great films have been made of Shakespeare, as you well know, because the tapestry is wide and it's a spectacle. Now, the first drafts of this play were even more like that. And we started to go, and we showed it to some people. Everybody said, "You guys are crazy. No one will ever put this on the stage. It's terrific." But you're back to the theater the way, in a way, theater was meant to be, which is spectacle, and not just spectacle of sets, but spectacle of characters and people moving through time. And that's sort of why we did it. For the second reason, of course, is thematic, because we were trying to draw the parallel between the time of the Soviet Union at its heyday in the 20s and 30s and our current dilemma with Islamism. And that is why we linked up the stories of Walter Duranty back then in Stalin's era, and Pim Fortuyn and his reaction in the early part of this century to Islamism in Holland and Europe in general. And we try to connect those.
Let's stop on that for a moment, so don't elide that. You to say it again, what you did, because it's incredibly important, and it's part of the electric nature of the read.
We tried to deliberately interweave in plot and character and theme, all of it. That period, that epic of Stalinism in the 20s and 30s. Of course, Stalin didn't die until the 50s, but the height of Stalinism and the beginning of this era.
The period when Stalin was actually creating what would become the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
Right, so it's the equivalent period to Islamism today.
Yes. The era that was being lied about to the American public by Duranty so that people would accept communism the way they're accepting Islamism on this very day. I mean, where Morsi's not a character in this. We're setting this back a few years, but
he could be.
He could be. I mean, the idea of Morsi being shoved down the throat of the American public is similar to the way Stalin was shoved out of the throat of the American public in 1933 or whatever year we recognized the Soviet Union. But by the way, we recognized the Soviet Union, looping back to Roosevelt, of course, was the one who recognized the Soviet Union. Roosevelt said he recognized the Soviet Union because of the work of Walter Duranty.
Yeah. Do you remember the New York Times used to have these ads, when want ads, the way people got jobs, you say, "I got my job through the New York Times." and I remember that was the picture of Castro and of Stalin. "I got my job through the New York Times." That's an extraordinary intellectual feat. It takes an enormous imagination to be able to take a stage and move people through that and through generations the way you do. And did you stumble on that? Did you set out to do it? I mean, was that one of those writers' things?
I think we stumbled on it. But here's how we stumbled on it. And that is that both of us have done, look, years ago I went to the Yale Drama School as a playwright. I don't claim that I was
For which you're forgiven now.
Yeah, I wasn't, for which I'm forgiven now, and which I wasn't very good at that at all. I mean, but, I was young, okay. But anyway, the writing for the stage is a very difficult medium, as you know, and in some ways more difficult than screen. But we had spent Sheryl and I have spent most of our lives writing for the screen because we loved it, because it was remunerative, all the things that probably you share exactly. Anyway, when we started to deal with the subject of Duranty and what this was about, the screen did not seem to be the right medium to us. It may eventually be. This could morph into a movie, as certain plays do. But dealing with these kind of ideas in on a serious level, somehow you felt like you had to do it on stage.
One last question then, okay? Or it may not be the last question, but it's the big question, a major question. I made fun of the Yale Drama School. Let's stipulate that that's one of the most extraordinary incubators in the world. A very difficult place to gain entry, and does an extraordinary work, and has graduated some of our best dramatists or dramatic thinkers. You said in passing, the theater is in many ways more difficult than screenwriting. Which I think is an amazing understatement. Explain that, because everyone thinks that nobody goes out to write a play. Everyone thinks they can write a screenplay, but very few people actually try and write.
I have to say, as someone who's spent, as some of the viewers of the show know, the last few years writing one hell of a lot of essays for PJ Media.
Oh, that's true.
That is much easier for me than either a play or a screenplay. And I think, I'm sure it's true for you too. Because when you're dealing with both a play and a screenplay, you're dealing with story construction. Primarily, that is the king. And the construction of a play is even more difficult, I think, because you are presented with a situation where there are fewer cheats. You have to go through everything in dialogue and some action.
There's no subtext. You know, I always say when you write a screenplay, there's no prose. Everything is in quotation marks. You can't suddenly get off and say, he felt in his heart that he was doing the wrong thing. But anyway, you have to play that subtext. Subtext is very possible in film. But it seems to me that in the theater, what it's always been challenging, and I have written for the theater, what's always more challenging is the fact that you really aren't allowed subtext either. The dialogue has to be constructed with such precision that the communication is instant. There are no extra words. There's no kind of flouncing that you can do in film. They once asked W.H. Auden, what is poetry? He said it's excellent speech. Theater is the excellent speech of dramatic presentation, and I think you achieve it in this thing. It's called The Play. It's on Amazon. Do it. Go and get it. Read it, particularly if you are an aspiring writer, either dramatist or film. Read this play, and you will be well rewarded. I was, and hey, I know everything.
Hey, well, thanks a lot. Let's go over to Matt Atchity at Rotten Tomatoes for the upcoming flicks.
Hi, this is Matt Atchity, Editor-in-Chief of RottenTomatoes.com, here to let you know what's in theaters this weekend. There's really only one movie, and it's called The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Now, this is the first entry into a new trilogy from Peter Jackson, who directed the Lord of the Rings franchise. This is a prequel to Lord of the Rings. This is the story of how Bilbo got the ring as part of a larger adventure. This movie originally was set to be the first of 2 movies. Now they're doing 3, and so it's kind of been padded out, and the critics are not really happy about that. Score's only about 64% right now. It's a lot lower than the 90s that the original Lord of the Rings movies ended up coming in at. And I think a lot of it is because the movie kind of meanders. It goes off in these different directions. It's not a tight narrative. You get a lot of things that are going to be set up for later movies, and I have every confidence that they're going to pay off. But it kind of takes away from this movie, and it doesn't stand alone very well. So that's where a lot of the critics are complaining. What I will say is that the movie ends really strong. It gets really excited. Once it gets going, finally, it gets really exciting, and it ends with a bang. So on that level, it does work pretty well. In the end, I do think this is worth seeing, and the fans of the movie are going to be really happy. But I do have to warn you, it's not perfect. It's okay that it's not perfect. It's still going to make a bunch of money. Now, one of the things I should also talk about is that there's a new format for this film, and it's at 48 frames a second. Most movies are shown at 24 frames a second. This one is double the frame rate, with the idea being that it's super high definition, and it absolutely is. But sometimes that's not always a good thing. The movement in some cases in the beginning of the film looks sped up. It's not actually sped up, but it looks that way. Once you get used to it, it looks great, but it takes about an hour and a half to get used to it. At least it did for me, and a lot of critics are saying this. And so it kind of can distract from what you should be watching. And some of the effects later in the movie look great. Gollum has never looked more present. It's the best representation of Gollum I've ever seen. I'm now convinced that that character actually exists somewhere, and I'm quite terrified. My recommendation would be see it for the first time in 24 frames so that you can just get a sense of the regular story, then go back and you can compare how the new technology works. Ultimately, this movie is going to make a ton of money, and I think that if you're looking forward to it, you're probably going to be pretty happy. Well, The Hobbit's the only movie this week. Now make sure to check back on RottenTomatoes.com for all of the latest scores for any movie that's in theaters. And make sure to check back here next week where I'll be talking about This Is 40 and a movie that I know is going to probably generate some controversy and people are really looking forward to, Zero Dark 30.
Thanks, Matt. We'll be back next time at Poliwood with more of our Oscar DVDs.
Yes, indeed.
This has been Roger Simon.
And Lionel Chetwynd.
Next week in Poliwood.